Blumhouse. What is up, guys? Welcome to my review of the newest Blumhouse horror film, The Woman in the Yard. And this is a film that I absolutely walked into completely blind. I knew nothing about this film other than the production company, the title, and I had seen the poster of the woman covered in the black veil sitting in the yard. And so my assumption was at least, hey, I'll walk into this thing, maybe it'll be terrible, maybe it'll be interesting, but it's got to be about something more than just a woman sitting in a yard, right? Nope. It's about a woman sitting in a fucking yard. So the plot of this film is that you have a recently widowed mother and her two kids that are, for lack of a better word, stuck in their farmhouse. And out of nowhere, this very sinister looking woman covered in a black veil starts sitting in their yard and progressively gets a little bit closer to the house as the day goes on. And let's call a spade a spade. Blumhouse has not had the best track record lately. They've never had a spotless track record. They've always been 50-50 at best, but the last 3 or so years, they have had way more misses than hits. And last year, 3 of their releases, 3 out of the 4 movies that they released, were all in my bottom 10. So I walked into this definitely thinking there's a possibility that I don't enjoy it and that it's among the 3 movies I did not enjoy last year, but really didn't have any strong expectations for this one. And I'm here to tell you, for a movie that I did not really have any expectations for and certainly wasn't a film that was really on my radar, I just kind of went out to see it because it was out. It was one of the new releases this week. This thing really pissed me off. The way that this movie wraps up, what it ultimately ends up being about, the way that they explore all of that, the way that they literally toy with you as a viewer, really fucking angered me. I don't often get angry at movies. I get disappointed and I'll certainly get passionate about how much I don't like them if they're just really bad. But it's rare that I have a movie that evokes genuine distaste, where I'm physically pissed off walking out of a film and my stomach is in knots at what I just experienced. So with that being said, this is one of those rare reviews where I do have to eventually get into spoilers. Now, we're not going to do that until the later part of this review, so have no fear if you want to keep watching and get an idea of what the movie is. I'm going to have plenty of things that I did like about it and plenty of things that I did not like about it that we can talk about in a spoiler-free fashion. But by the end of the video, in order to completely convey why I had the emotional response that I did to the woman in the yard, I have to discuss in detail the last 10 or 15 minutes of this movie. So you've been warned. But really quick before we get into the review, if you ever find this strong desire to go sit in your neighbor's yard all day long, you might want to be accompanied by Ricon's everyday headphones. So check out the sponsor of today's video, Rincon. We're already almost through the first quarter of the year, and whether you're gearing up for spring cleaning or hitting the gym to get that beach body ready, one thing makes those activities so much better, and that's the soundtrack to your life. Ricon's everyday headphones are better than ever and are your perfect partner when you're on the go. The latest model has a 40-hour battery life, a comfortable ergonomic design, and even active noise cancellation, which is a feature that is rare to see at this price point. And for me, the active noise cancellation is an absolute must because of the music that my gym decides to play. I swear to God, if I have to hear November Rain one more time, I'm gonna drop a weight on my face. But luckily for me, they also have an awareness mode, which really comes in handy when I'm listening to music or I'm editing at home because I can still keep an ear out for my kids. But by far my favorite new function is the quick charge mode, because we have all been in that situation where we're on the road to the airport or we're about to leave to the gym and we forgot to charge our headphones. Well, you can get a 2-hour battery life out of these with just a 15-minute charge. And with all that being said, the best thing about Rincon is that you get all of those premium features for half what the other guys charge. So if you're looking to add the everyday headphones to your everyday life, go to buyraycon.com/CodyLeach25, where all headphones are 25% off. That's right, all headphones are 25% off on Ricon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/CodyLeach25. And thank you so much to Rincon for sponsoring today's video. So starting off with the positives of Woman in the Yard. I really like the director of this film. I'm probably going to fuck up his name, but Jaume Collet Serra, he has done a number of films that I really enjoy. Just to list off some, the House of Wax remake from 2005 is a big favorite of mine. Orphan, you got a couple of Liam Neeson thrillers in there, like Run All Night being one that I really enjoy. A lot of people like The Shallows. Even Jungle Cruise, for as much as I made fun of it, was somewhat enjoyable. Carry On from last year, which I really enjoyed. He's had a ton of movies that I really like. I like his style. And I think that the visual flair that he brings to this movie, most notably with how he uses shadows, is the standout in this film. All throughout the movie, even though there were plenty of things I didn't like about it, the one thing that I was continuously impressed by and really engaged with is how he utilizes shadows to set up scares and to kind of convey what this woman in the yard can do. There's even a section of the film where they're trying to like block out all of the windows to keep the sunlight and the shadows in so that she's not able to do anything inside of the house. It's a really cool little spin on some supernatural powers, some supernatural entity that's kind of like surrounding this house. So I really like the way that he did that. I also think that, you get into some dream sequences in this movie, and the way that he transitions in and out of those dream sequences was also very visually striking, like having glass shatter inside of the dream and then transitioning into the real world and having the glass shatter go away. Like, there's some really neat things that they do in this film to kind of elevate what's going on, and a very basic story to have a little bit more style and flash to it. Danielle Deadwyler plays the main character here, the grieving mom, and I think that she does a very good job. There's a lot of different emotions that are required out of her as an actress for this character. You've got anger, you've got fright, you've got grief, sadness, happiness, like basically the whole spectrum. And I think that she does a really good job. It's basically just her and two kids. That's the entirety of your cast for the most part. And I think she does a great job at carrying this film. I also thought it was commendable how much tension and how much of an unnerving feeling they really do get out of something as simple as a woman just sitting in the yard. Like, it's very easy to say that, and I probably have in this review in kind of a snarky way to show like how basic the plot is. But just the visual of a woman in black that you really only see her hands sitting in the yard, ominously, not talking, not moving, not getting up to piss, just sitting there, staring at your house all fucking day long. The way that they visualize that, and the way that the camera stays on her, and the way that she slowly creeps towards the house, like, it's subtle enough to where it's just really unnerving. And so for such a basic premise, for such a basic source of the scares, I think that they get a lot out of that, which again, I'll credit to the director.
Today's the day.
And the last thing that I'll say, which really is just kind of born out of my expectations of going into Blumhouse films over the last couple of years, I do think that this movie really does have a complete picture of what it's trying to say. This is a film that definitely has thematic elements that they're exploring. It does have something that's trying to have as a message or as an exclamation point by the end of the film. It's trying to bring a lot of things together, both in your surface level story as well as what they're cooking underneath. And a number of recent Blumhouse films, even ones that have simple plots and low budgets like Night Swim and Afraid and Imaginary, never really have that. It never really feels like it's a complete picture. It never really feels like they get to convey everything they're trying to convey. It feels like it's half cooked. This film is certainly not half cooked. I don't really like what they're cooking, and we're going to get into that, but it does feel like a completely realized idea and story, and I appreciate that. Starting off with the negatives, I really did not like the characters in this film. Performances aside, I just didn't think there was anything enjoyable about who we were spending time with and who we were going through the story with on screen. You had the little girl who was the only one who was tolerable just because she's the innocent child. Like, there's nothing about her to dislike. But a lot of you guys know one of my pet peeves, I don't like the trope in horror films where you get the angsty teenage character who's just disrespectful and rebellious, and that's their entire personality, and you absolutely get that in this film, even though there's reasons for him to be that way in spots. It's laid on way too thick where that's just all you get from this kid. And then the main character, Ramona here, absolute shitbag mom. Now, that's kind of part of the point of the movie. That's something that's definitely interwoven into the story and what they're exploring here. But it's just not pleasant to be around, especially if you are a parent. Like, when you see a character like this who's just an absolute garbage mom in about every way possible, and you're just spending time with her for 90 minutes, like, it's not enjoyable. It's not interesting. It's not somebody that I want to spend this amount of time with. Moving on from that, this is absolutely one of those classic examples of a film that has a really interesting setup and premise that would work much better in a short film format. but unfortunately it has been stretched out to feature length. And so, like with most movies that have that, you have an incredibly slow burn movie where it feels like not a whole lot is happening throughout a large portion of the film, namely the middle hour. There's not a whole lot that's happening after the thing gets set up and the woman starts sitting in the yard. It's literally just the woman sitting in the yard, slightly changing places in the yard, and everybody inside the house looking out the windows wondering why this bitch is sitting in the yard. Sprinkle in a few scenes of the kid being rebellious and talking back to his mom and telling her what he's going to do, a few scenes of the little girl acting cute coloring with crayons, and a few scenes of her losing her shit and being a shitbag mom to her kids. That's pretty much the middle hour of this film. And the unfortunate byproduct that happens traditionally when you have a film like this that is not doing a whole lot to keep you engaged or entertained throughout most of the runtime is that you automatically put way more expectations on the third act of the film. You're really starting to hope even harder that something is eventually going to happen that's going to kick this thing into high gear, that's going to bring in some shocks or some surprises, something that is going to merit this journey that we are going on with this film that is really testing your patience. And very few films' third acts can live up to those types of expectations, this one included. And the main reasons why this third act fails to really deliver and fails to make up for the first two acts of the film is, first of all, it becomes incredibly incoherent and scattershot and overstuffed with ideas and visuals and twisting of POVs and what is real and what is not, what is dreams, what is not, what does this visual mean? Well, here's it from a different angle. It just goes balls to the wall in the last 15 minutes or so of this film. And it just becomes so much information, so many visuals that you have to interpret and figure out and compute in your head that it's impossible to keep up with. And so when the film finally does take a moment to breathe in the third act, you're not necessarily even focusing on what's happening. You're just trying to sift through all the shit that you just saw to try to figure out what exactly is happening so that you can be in a place to hopefully better understand what's to come next. And I never really got there. And one of the reasons why they decide to go that route with the third act is because they are trying to play this story out in a way that ends with a lot of ambiguity, where you walk out with a bunch of different people that just saw the same movie as you, and you all stand around or sit in the car and go, what did you think? Here's what I thought. This is how I interpreted things. This is what I think the movie represents. This is what I think happened at the end. This was real. This wasn't. And that can be awesome when it's done right. That can be such a nice little doggy bag experience after a movie to sit there and sift through all the same data with other people and have them challenge what you thought, have you challenge what they thought. It could be great when it's done right. But in my opinion, for my own personal taste, it's done right more times than not by withholding information from you, forcing you as the viewer to fill in little blanks, to connect the dots, to fill the gaps in your own way, in your own head, to make everything make sense. And we're all going to fill those gaps differently, hence our different interpretations. But this is one of those movies that goes for ambiguity by trying to overload you with information, by trying to have so much shit that happens within a 10-minute period and so many visual changes and so many perspective changes and reality changes that you just walk out confused rather than interested and curious, even to the point where it would contradict itself. It contradicts its own rules. As soon as you start to have a certain understanding of how the rules of this movie works and what everything ends up being by the end of it, there was another thing pretty close in the same shot or in the same sequence that directly contradicts what you just thought you understood. Like, I was talking with my friend Sydney from Horror Chronicles over on TikTok, and she had said she basically gave a whole half a star to her rating just because of the way the movie ended. It totally redeemed it for her. And I said, yeah, it was starting to redeem it for me too, until I remembered just 15 seconds previous, they had this shot that directly contradicts the ending of the movie. And she goes, God damn it, I got to take that half a star away now. Yeah, it doesn't make any fucking sense. You're right. But beyond just the way that the third act was executed, my significantly larger issue with the climax and the movie as a whole is what it ultimately represents, is what the message of the film, what the theme of the film, what we're exploring and commentating on, what the woman in the yard represents by the climax of this movie genuinely pissed me off. Gave me a nauseous feeling in my stomach and then pissed me off. and not in a good way. Sometimes it's nice to be challenged by movies. Sometimes you want to have that pit in your stomach. It means they got a reaction out of you, and that's absolutely a fact. And some people will have that experience with The Woman in the Yard. But there's some times where you can go too bleak, you can go too depressing, too dark, to where it quite literally is distasteful. And it absolutely decimates the experience that the viewer was having up until that point. But all in all, guys, before I dive into spoilers, look, this is not as bad as some recent Blumhouse efforts. It's got a little bit more merit to it. It is more cohesive as far as a vision. The directing is stronger. So if you're interested in it, maybe give it a shot. I do see this being a bit of a divisive film where some are going to get more out of it than others. But for me personally, just my own personality, my own things that I value, the way that this movie ultimately turned out, it just absolutely decimated any bit of enjoyment that I had. And it quite literally made my day worse. And for as much as horror should challenge you, there's no movie experience out there that I can value that actually makes my day worse. All right, now we are fully in spoiler territory. If you have not gotten the multiple warnings, let's go ahead and throw the spoiler warning up here. So this is a film that's ultimately exploring grief and trauma, as if that's not an overused trope, right? So you have the main character who recently lost her husband in a car accident. She has been, her leg has been broken. She's very much immobilized throughout most of the film. But her grief from the loss of her husband is very present in her character throughout the entire film. And she's struggling to get through it. She's struggling to get past it. And she kind of takes it out on her kids, and either by lashing out angrily or just not really being present for them. And ultimately, in the last 10 minutes of this film, what it all ends up being about is that the woman in the yard is essentially a manifestation of her grief that has come to give her the last little bit of help and motivation she needs to take her own life. And as soon as that became apparent in the third act, like I actually had a knot in my stomach. I'm not exaggerating at all with that. I felt physically nauseous, because it really is effectively depressing and bleak as they start to reveal that, where she has a confrontation with the woman in the yard, and the woman in the yard says, "You pray every single day for strength. What are you praying for strength for?" And she says, "To go on." And the woman in the yard says, "No, that is not what you're praying for." And that's where they kind of slowly reveal to you, she wakes up every single day praying for the strength to pull the trigger and leave her kids without parents. And the moment that it really started to twist me was there's a scene where in the middle of all of this where she says, she starts to accept it and she asks, "Are my kids going to be okay?" And the woman in the yard lights a lighter and starts to shine by these little photographs that are on the wall. And the photographs start to change into adult pictures of her kids being successful, being happy, having the greatest life, because their mother killed herself and got out of their lives, and sets up this whole scenario where it's like, you have to end your life through grief so that your kids can have a great life. And I just thought that was such a gross fucking storyline to go through. Like, of all the ways to explore grief and trauma to that degree, you're literally hammering home the point of things will be better if you just end it all. And I've never had those types of thoughts. I've never been to the point where I have toyed with those notions, but I can only imagine people that have been through that, or people that have chronic depression where that pops up into their head regularly in their everyday life. That's the last fucking thing they need a movie to convey to them. So like, I'm never really the person to get up in arms about how irresponsible a movie's message is, but that literally felt like such a mind-blowingly irresponsible thing to have be the ultimate message of your film. And so they have a visual where the woman in the yard is literally helping her put the rifle to her head and puts her finger on the trigger, and it shows the shadow of the woman in the yard merge with her, and she has this creepy little smile, and then it cuts to her a minute or so later, probably walking out of the house and re-embracing with her kids. And this is the moment where I was like, Oh, thank God. Okay. That got really fucking dark there for a moment, but okay. We're talking about she had the strength to not pull the trigger. Cool. All right. I'm back on board. You almost lost me. I'm back on board. So she re-embraces with her kids, who she sent away. You know, she said, kids, go to the neighbors. I have to go upstairs to do something. Then they had that whole scene where she's about ready to do it. And now she walks back out into the yard and her kids are back at the house and they're embracing. And the woman in the yard is gone and the kids are like, where did she go? And the mom says, she's gone, but if she ever comes back, I know how to deal with her. And I'm like, all right, I'm on board for this. This is cool. I can dig this. And there's this whole thing that's going on throughout the movie where anytime she's like in the dream side of reality, everything is in a mirror image. So like she'll like kind of like Red Rum in The Shining. If she reads something, it's backwards. And so it shows her embracing her kids. They're walking back up to the front of the house. The electricity finally comes on that's been off the entire film. It shows this sign in front of the farm that says like Iris Haven, which calls back to a previous scene where her husband, before he died, wanted them to name the farm and she thought it was a silly idea. So paying off that in a really nice way. And then it starts, after they go into the house and embrace, it starts to zoom in on the window and it shows this painting that kind of looks like the woman in the yard and kind of looks like her, which they're both kind of the same person in a certain way anyway. And then it starts to zoom down and the way that she signed her name on the painting is backwards, which means that she went through with it, that she ended her life. And this is just like the final thoughts. This is her purgatory, whatever you want to interpret the final bit of information from this film. It's not real. And so you have a film that was heading in this extremely dark, depressing, and distasteful spot, and then redeemed it for a minute to be about something much more important and a much better message to put out there, which is to have the strength to say no, to move on and make things better and be there for the people that love you, that need you. Just for them to go back and punch you in the gut a second time by saying, nope, she actually did it. The kids are orphans now, and that's what has to happen when you have grief. Like, I fucking hated that. I hated that so much. Like, there's very few movies that I will say I hated. I absolutely hated the way that The Woman in the Yard wrapped up, and it made me hate the entire film. So, like, I get it if that's something that people walk out of and they say, wow, like, I love how powerful and how emotional that got me by the end of it. I thought it was so bleak that, like, I love that they had the balls to go there. I guess I can understand that. But for me, as somebody who loves my kids and my role as a father is the most important role of my life, I grew up with an absent mother and I'm taking care and raising two kids that are not mine because they had an absent father. Like, I'm very passionate about parents not being in their kids' lives because it is so ingrained in how my life has gone. And when I'm watching a story like this, where you have two kids that are already experiencing loss and grief that will probably never fully heal because of the tragic death of their father, and now that is only going to be compounded and multiplied because their mother took herself out of the equation, there's no version of that story that I can get behind. Like, it's not meant to be enjoyable, but I can't even appreciate it on an unenjoyable way. Like, it literally depressed me, made me nauseous, and the longer I sat there while the credits rolled, the more pissed off that I got. So, The Woman in the Yard, absolutely fucking not for me. Like, I just don't, I can't get behind that story, that conclusion at all. Not for me. And what makes it even worse is that, as I was hinting at earlier, like, there was an element of them going there with having her name be written backwards as a final reveal that I slightly could get behind. But just 10 seconds previous to that, when they showed the sign that showed the name of the farm, that was written regular. That was not shown in reverse. So going right back to what I said about how messy and how scattered and how confused the third act of this film is, even the fucked up, dark, depressing ending they were going for doesn't completely add up because they are contradicting themselves within the same sequence. Anyway, I'm done talking about this. Look, if you guys see The Woman in the Yard, let me know down below. If you're going to discuss spoilers, at least put a spoiler warning, because I'm sure we're going to get a lot of different passionate pros and cons in regard to that. So please just be respectful of everybody else that has not seen the film, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my review of Death of a Unicorn, which is the other new release this weekend for you to check out. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.